Life is full of mysteries, perhaps none more compelling than those that lie within the confines of the human mind. Most of us perceive the outside world by virtue of the 5 known senses. But there are some people who claim they see the world through extrasensory channels. Do these strange powers of the mind truly exist? Can they be measured, tested, even harnessed? Or are they simply wishful thinking? Join us on a journey of discovery as Reader's Digest's Mysteries of the Unexplained presents Powers of the Paranormal. In the middle of the night, in the year 1700, the city fathers of a small French town went grave robbing. They intended to steal from the tomb of one Michel de Nostradamus, better known as the prophet Nostradamus. According to legend, a document containing the secret to his extraordinary powers was buried with him in 1566. It was a fearful expedition. Some said his prophecies included a curse on tomb robbers. A medallion is discovered. Inexplicably, it seemed to be engraved 1700, the present date, the year 1700. The robbers were convinced that 134 years earlier, Nostradamus had foreseen this moment of his desecration. Horrified, they leave the prophet to his peace. Many people long to be told the future. They see it as a way to command their destiny, rather than be commanded by an unknown, impersonal fate. In every civilization, in every corner of the world, seers have arisen, and people have embraced their every word. Nostradamus himself followed in a tradition at least as ancient as the Greeks. Certainly his rituals seemed modeled after Brancus, one of the famed oracles of the great temple of Delphi. Seated by a smoking brazier, Brancus would conjure her visions of the future from the vapors in the air. But by the time of Nostradamus, fortune-telling was thought dangerously close to heresy, or worse. In a world where witchcraft was believed to work, and the devil was thought to be real, the soothsayer ran great risks. The Catholic Church saw little difference between a soothsayer and a heretic. Indeed, the Inquisition doled out a similar fate to both. Seers were interrogated and burned alive. This was the climate in which Nostradamus practiced his strange arts. Indeed, his interest in magic, his ecstatic trances, his writings and predictions, all might have doomed a lesser man. But so renowned was the mastery of Nostradamus that the nobility was able to protect him from the Inquisition.
Nostradamus walked a tightrope between religious correctness of the 16th century and getting himself burned at the stake. He died in his bed, so he was a success at not upsetting the church authorities too much. But you've got to understand, in the 16th century, it was not so much that you were performing heresies, but if you were indiscreet about it.
Over 36,000 words of prophecy flowed from his pen. His epic work, The Centuries, holds more than 900 predictions about the future of the world. They exerted a curious fascination then, as they do now. His fame really rested on the fact that one of his many prophecies seemed to foretell the death of the reigning monarch of France, Henry II.
The prophecy described in detail what happened. This is what it said. The young lion and the old lion will meet in ritualized combat on the field of honor. And then he says, he shall have his eyes pierced through the golden cage.
Henry was killed in a joust. He was not a young lion fighting an old one, but his opponent's lance shattered as they clashed, and the splintered shaft penetrated the golden visor of the king. It was an unusual and highly public death, and enhanced Nostradamus' reputation forever. Nostradamus' prophecies are couched in 4-lined rhymed verses called quatrains, written in an obscure and cryptic style, sprinkled with Hebrew, Latin, and Portuguese words. They're difficult to interpret. People have claimed that various verses foretold the Great Fire of London in 1666, details of the French Revolution, and the rise of Napoleon and Hitler. Volume 9, Quatrain 90, is the verse people quote as predicting the Nazis. The words provide a vehicle for people who really want to be believers. But you decide. A captain of great Germany will come to deliver through pretended help to the King of Kings the aid of Austria and Hungary, so that his revolt will cause a great flow of blood. Faith in Nostradamus has been kept alive by his followers discovering hidden meanings in his books. There's a real hunger for secret mysteries. It's also said that he predicted the end of the world in the one quatrain that contains a date. In the year 1999 and 7 months, the great King of Terror will come from the sky. Nostradamus' enthusiasts await the millennium with bated breath. And should the great King of Terror not appear, well, Nostradamus himself said that his predictions would run until the year 3797, and presumably did not think the world would end in 1999. But the idea of paranormal powers is so powerful that a hint becomes evidence, and evidence proof. Can psychics interpret clues and answer questions the rest of us cannot? The Reader's Digest decided to put together its own team of paranormal investigators to find out.
Sometimes you have to use alternative methods of investigation to point you in the right direction, and you have to keep an open mind as to all possibilities.
A little girl has been missing from her home in Rochester, New York for 2.5 years. The longer she's missing, the more surely chances of finding her decrease. Time is running out. We hired Nancy Meyer, a psychic from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She's worked on more than 250 police investigations all over the United States. She claims a success rate of 90%. Jim Wright has worked with Nancy Meyer before.
The important thing about working with Nancy was that she knew nothing about the case, and there were several instances where we had her on the scene of the crime that she was able to tell us specific details about the case that she would have no way of knowing. And also, she had done some work for us in the way of sketches of suspects and a murder weapon and so forth that we were able later to link up with some suspects.
My mind seems to be able to pick up a lot of information from photos of the crime scene. That's what I primarily use. Or if it's a missing person, I use photos, handwriting samples, maps to try, and then all of a sudden I'll lock in on some part of the situation that will tell me, this is what happened.
Meyer needs very little to begin her search for the missing girl. Just a map showing where the child was last seen, a photograph of the girl that clearly shows her eyes, and a personal belonging.
It's kind of like watching a movie editing session. It's, there's a piece here, there's a piece there. Some of it runs in a nice sequence, usually it doesn't. And trying to put the pieces together in a way that makes sense can be kind of mind-boggling. It's very fast. The images just fly through my mind.
Meyer has no prior knowledge of the case or the people involved.
She's a very friendly, outgoing kind of child, very open child. And I do feel that she had talked to him on at least 3 previous occasions, but nothing in detail.
There's gonna be a 6-6 beast, and this beast is gonna be the last empire that ruled Jerusalem.
Through the centuries, countless men and women have been respected as having oracular or divinatory powers. In fact, all human societies used to depend on these people for guidance. In our culture, they've become more of a curiosity. Insights that used to govern the actions of rulers are now treated as superstition. There are people who prophesy. What can we make of them?
The earth will be broken up. The upper portion of Europe will be changed as in the twinkling of an eye. The greater portion of Japan must go into the sea.
The words of Edgar Cayce, an ordinary man, except for being taken as a prophet. Born in rural Kentucky in 1877, Cayce was a below-average student. Even his parents despaired at his inability to learn. But in 1890, all that would change. As young Edgar played baseball one afternoon, a ball hit him near the base of his spine. Cayce didn't seem seriously hurt, but when he went to bed and fell asleep, he began to speak. Cayce's words were not the ramblings of a fevered brain, but instructions aimed at effecting his own cure. His prescription called for a poultice of cornmeal, onions, and herbs to be applied to his neck. His amazed parents did as they were told. The following morning, all signs of Cayce's injury had gone. They believed he had just delivered his first psychic reading. By the time he was in his 30s, Cayce was regularly dictating medical treatments and prophecies to a willing audience. His method was always the same. Falling into a trance-like sleep, he began to speak out loud. An assistant would transcribe his words. Upon waking, Cayce would remember nothing. He became known throughout the Western world as America's sleeping prophet. Like Nostradamus, it was claimed that his prophecies could be interpreted as predicting the stock market crash of 1929, the timing and duration of World War II, and the death in office of John F. Kennedy. True to his unassuming nature, Casey never thought himself unique. He believed that everyone could develop psychic powers. On one occasion, Casey strayed from prophecy and gave instructions on how to read another's mind.
First, begin between selves. Set a definite time, and each at that moment put down what the other is doing. Do this 20 days. You shall find you have the key to telepathy.
It's intriguing that he really believed this would work. It doesn't for most people. And yet most people have had a sense of seeing into the future, at least once in their lives. According to a recent study, dreams are the most frequently reported vehicle for psychic experiences. Researcher Alan Vaughan believes in prophetic dreams.
I think everyone should realize that we have this extraordinary potential within us to dream about the future. And this is part of our guidance mechanism. This is what helps people create success, either through their dreams, or often people will have, shall we call it, waking visions or hunches or intuitions of things that will work out for them.
Vaughan bases his belief on personal experience. In April of 1968, he began to have a series of strange and disturbing dreams. It was an election year. U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy was campaigning for the Democratic nomination for president. Over the next few weeks, as Kennedy gained momentum, Vaughan's dreams grew more vivid, his sense of an evil premonition stronger. The campaign was now in high gear. As the crucial California primary approached, Bobby Kennedy was looking good in the polls.
My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. Thank you.
May 25th, I woke up with a dream in which Robert Kennedy was being shot. In the dream, he was walking with some young people, walking down a hallway, and they were planning to go to a party. It was at night, and suddenly there were shots fired.
Vaughan tried to get a message through to the Kennedy campaign, to no avail. Just 10 days after the dream, on the night of his victory in California, Robert Kennedy was assassinated.
On June the 5th, when I heard the news that Robert Kennedy had been shot, it was the most horrible feeling I've ever had in my life. It was like I was guilty. It was my fault because I had not been successful in warning him. But as the news came in, I was able to compare it with the dreams, and there were a dozen points of correspondence. From a parapsychological point of view, this was really good evidence.
Many people have explored the predictive power of dreams, and there have been experiments to try to test whether the human mind can know things that are hidden from the senses. For the last 70 years, an American research institute has sought to answer questions such as these. The Rhine Institute of Parapsychology is in Durham, North Carolina. Its director is Dr. Richard Broughton. He's convinced that there's a scientific basis for prophecy and other extrasensory powers.
My feeling is that if ESP is a human ability, then by definition, we all have it to some degree. You know, we all have intelligence of some degree, but we all can't, get PhDs. So it is something we all have, but we're going to see very large differences in terms of how people can deploy it, how people can use it in their daily lives.
Broughton's convictions are based on the longest and most rigorous series of scientific studies ever conducted in the area of ESP. The Institute's founder, Dr. J.B. Rhine, was determined to put the new science of parapsychology onto a scientific footing. To test the psychic ability of his subjects, Rhine used a specially designed deck of cards called Zener cards. The symbols on the cards were selected because they were easy to remember and of roughly equal visual weight. Carefully shielded from a tester, Rhine's subjects were asked to state the precise sequence in which the cards had been drawn from the pack. Most got nowhere, but Hubert Pierce did. On one occasion, Rhine offered Pierce $100 for every correct guess he made. He successfully predicted a 25-card sequence and pocketed $2,500, defeating odds of about 300 trillion to 1. By the 1970s, Zener cards were no longer used to measure the mind's influence on chance events. Computers had replaced them. Meanwhile, Rhine turned his attention to remote viewing, the ability to visualize an object or event from far away.
Remote viewing is just a different name for extrasensory perception, but when it's directed at distant locations. But it's a kind of ESP where there's a sort of general free response on the part of the subject to describe whatever he or she is seeing.
We all have the ability to imagine pictures in our minds, but remote viewers claim they have a form of second sight. This would be the most practical of all psychic skills and is frequently put to the test. In the most simple experiments, a subject is isolated in a room and is asked to describe a photograph outside the room. Despite never having seen the photograph, the remote viewer then tries to visualize the image in his mind. Under perfect conditions, such photographs seem to have been described in minute detail. And some people claim they can bring these mental images into focus under almost any circumstances. Joe McMoneagle, the most renowned remote viewer in the United States, believes he can remote view on demand. A class of students at the Rhine Institute will watch McMoneagle as he demonstrates his skill. A computer has randomly selected the target image from a library of hundreds. It's been sealed in an envelope and placed in a separate room.
Generally, when I begin a remote view, I'm looking at the fragmentary or bits and pieces that are coming in very rapidly and trying to create some picture out of that. These first elements come in very fragmented form. They come in symbology a lot of times. Like one of the things I'm getting is this sort of symbol. That doesn't actually represent anything, but what it does mean is it's probably a reflective surface of some kind.
McMoneagle uses a kind of visual shorthand to describe the images he sees in his mind. He visualizes elements of the photograph by broad characteristics like shape, color, and size.
With a major fall off or drop. The important thing about this consolidation is not to assume that the reflection is water or that this drop-off is a waterfall or anything like that. You don't want to make any of those assumptions.
Most psychics seem to experience a similar jumble of images when attempting to remote view. Putting the pieces together can be difficult. McMoneagle's completed vision describes an image with a shadowed area in the upper right, some structures on the left side, a reflective surface on the bottom right, and a drop-off in the middle. In this case, Joe's remote viewing is judged to be a direct hit. We were so impressed by McMonagle's remote viewing skills that we asked him to join the Reader's Digest investigative team. Joe McMonagle's experience as a psychic investigator includes 25 criminal cases. He claims his crime-solving record is 60% successful. McMonagle is now set up to remote view in his home in Charlottesville, Virginia. For a remote viewer, it's much harder to find a missing person than to identify an object or a location.
You can develop some very detailed drawings of the location that a person might be held in, or the location of, say, a missing body or something. But the problem is, even with a detailed drawing, let's say it was a drawing of a trailer park. There are how many trailer parks in America?
He needs the date and time the little girl disappeared. Nothing else. McMonagle has been given no information about the case, but at least one of his predictions will prove true.
She was playing on a bike at the time, or had her bicycle with her. I get a sense that she probably lost part of her clothing, a shoe or a sock or something. She was taken by force. She didn't have any idea who her kidnappers were.
One more facet of Joe McMonagle's biography must be mentioned. He's a graduate of the most remarkable program in the history of American espionage. Joe was a remote viewer for U.S. intelligence.
Mr. Joseph McMonagle received a Legion of Merit Award, which was given in part for providing invaluable information with a novel intelligence gathering technique, which was briefed at the highest levels of the executive and congressional branches of our government.
In the throes of the Cold War, the CIA received information that the Soviet Union was turning to parapsychology as a source of exotic espionage. Concerned that the Soviets might actually discover some strategic use of psychic powers, the United States retaliated. In 1972, the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency created Operation Stargate. A team of psychics spent 20 years and $20 million of government money attempting to visualize everything from the identity of KGB agents to the design of top-secret enemy submarines. In 1980, these psychics were asked to find out where Iranian terrorists were holding American hostages. And after the US invaded Panama in 1989, these psychics were enlisted to provide information about fugitive President Manuel Noriega. They were asked to provide a layout of the interior of Noriega's home. The psychics delivered a top-secret report with their descriptions of the rooms and their contents. In 1994, the CIA was ordered to investigate the Stargate program.
There was large media attention when the CIA finally announced their findings, and ESP and the use of it in the government are ripe for ridicule. Our project, however, really survives best with responsible criticism. We enjoy skeptics. In fact, if we can't find them, we'll hire them from somewhere if they don't volunteer. We want skepticism because we improve our product, we learn more about what's going on.
Once the CIA had learned what was going on, the Stargate program was terminated. The psychics had come up with useful information 25% of the time. Mostly, they'd been wrong. ESP remains an enigmatic power.
My feeling is that this anomalous information, extrasensory perception, comes and goes and serves similar needs to creativity. And we certainly can recognize great creativity in poetry or art, but it's very spontaneous. You cannot take a creative person and stick them in an artificial environment and say, make a masterpiece. It doesn't work like that.
The story behind our psychic investigation is a tragic one. Judy Gifford is suffering the pain of an experience that's every parent's nightmare. It was early evening on a beautiful spring day. It seemed like any other Monday. Judy picked up her 4-year-old daughter Kaylee after work. Then Kaylee went to get him one last ride around the block before dinner. It was around 7 p.m. that she last saw her little girl. As the clock keeps ticking, Judy is desperate to find Kaylee. She is open to using psychic detectives to help.
Maybe they can see something that somebody inside is not being able to see, like the forest through the trees kind of scenario. Maybe our police department are looking at things and not being able to see the answer. Maybe an outsider can come in and see something that they can't.
All over metropolitan Rochester, on the southern shore of Lake Ontario, Kaylee's photograph has been distributed. Her smiling face is everywhere.
You know what it feels as though someone rips your heart out while it's still beating in their hand. Because that's what I felt like. Someone just stole my life, which is my child.
Remote viewing is a passive skill which may be linked to some sort of telepathy. But there are people who believe that mental power can actually affect physical objects. This is called psychokinesis. Obviously, such a power directly contradicts our understanding of the laws of physics. Not to mention our understanding of the rules of the game of pool. One person who achieved fame overnight with his supposed psychokinetic talents was Uri Geller.
5 degrees, that moves. What are you saying to yourself?
I'm saying now bend. I just wanted to bend.
The controversial Israeli claims to have been employing paranormal powers since he first bent a soup spoon at the age of 4.
I sort of reserve judgment about Mr. Geller and his spoon bending. I've never worked with him. It's the kind of thing where scientists generally like to stay out of the stage magician's craft, because I mean, stage magicians will always have the better of scientists, no matter how well trained they may be.
Yes, look, it's becoming there. It's becoming.
Geller has been widely suspected of fraud. Critics say he weakens the metal he claims to bend beforehand, or distracts the audience's attention, giving him time to switch one spoon for another.
There's absolutely no heat.
Is that solid silver, Lord Bath?
Yeah, made by Gerrard's in London.
Among the skeptics is Richard Wiseman, an expert on the art of deception. He makes his living uncovering psychic fraud.
Often psychics are very opportunistic. They'll walk into a situation not quite knowing what they're going to do. They'll look around, they'll exploit the moments when everyone's attention drops, or suddenly everyone's looking in a particular direction. Perhaps they'll tweak a spoon and leave it on the table bent, and then 10 minutes later say, you know, hold on, I'm concentrating on bending a spoon, can anyone see one that's bent? That sort of thing.
Here in Paris, we found another man who claims psychokinetic powers. We decided to put him to the test. His name is Jean-Pierre Girard. In the 1970s, he rode the coattails of Uri Geller's fame, baffling audiences with his alleged ability to move solid objects with the power of his mind. But like Uri Geller, Girard was widely accused of fraud. Eventually, he dropped out of the limelight.
Demonstrations are often too flashy and done without scientific supervision. I rarely do demonstrations for the media. For the last 20 years, I've been doing mainly experiments in laboratories in a strictly controlled scientific environment.
Je vais simplement demander à Jean-Pierre Girard de se laver les mains très consciencieusement.
Today, Girard has agreed to demonstrate his abilities under one condition, that a properly controlled testing environment be provided. A French magician named Ronqui is Jean-Pierre's monitor. He's president of a French association that's often called upon to investigate claims of paranormal occurrences. As a magician, Ronqui believes he's familiar with all the tricks and illusions someone claiming psychokinetic powers could use to fool an audience.
An illusionist is the person best suited to uncover fraud. Absolutely, all paranormal phenomena can be reproduced using illusion. That is to say, I can bend an iron bar, move an object, or do any of those sort of things, but I use magic tricks to do it.
A glass table is set up so Girard's hands are visible at all times. Ronqui has personally chosen and closely inspected the metal bars Girard will try to bend. Each is labelled with a different number to prevent Girard from switching bars during the demonstration. The 10 bars are made from a non-magnetic metal alloy. They're 10 millimeters in diameter and 25 centimeters in length. We watched as Jean-Pierre went to work. Approximately 10 minutes into the demonstration, the metal bar he held began to bend. At first, the bowing of the rod was minimal, but Girard continued to work, taking breaks between each exertion. After 3 sessions, he had successfully bent a straight metal bar by 30 degrees.
This is the first time I've seen an effect happen so quickly. Jean-Pierre Girard presents us a problem without a solution. I'm unable to explain. Even though I was right there, I cannot explain. I don't think any other musician could explain what he has done.
But Richard Wiseman, who's performed hundreds of experiments with people claiming psychokinetic powers, remains unconvinced.
I would love to see a miracle. I would love to meet a genuine psychic. And people often say, well, given all your negative results, don't you become very cynical? Don't you think you're wasting your time? But the fact is that at the end of the day, you know, I would love someone to come through and prove us wrong.
As our psychic investigation continues, 2 competing visions emerge.
Can't get past this feeling that she knows this guy because she's so trusting of him. I have the feeling that he took her in a mid-sized car. I get the feeling that it was a Buick LeSabre and it was kind of a metallic blue.
The van that was used in the kidnapping was sort of an off-white with gold markings or stripes, and it was stolen.
He has sedated her in some way. I would think logically chloroform, but I don't smell that, so it's something else. But he's knocked her out.
I have the van departing the area by accessing a 4-lane interstate road, and that was essentially going south.
He's heading south on 490, And he goes about 5.5 to 6 miles, and he bears off an exit to the right.
Really didn't take her with the intent of keeping her. She was delivered somewhere else.
He sexually assaulted this child, and in the process of doing that, she was asphyxiated.
I have a sense that she's still alive.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Some physical phenomena cannot be explained without reference to the power of the mind.
This is a quick and very dangerous thing, and it's very powerful. Turns a lot of terror and fear into real high excitement.
Overcoming fear and conquering the coals is seen as a powerful and life-transforming ritual.
It's a metaphor for personal transformation, personal power. People can see the possibilities for themselves, that they can do more than they think they're capable of doing.
Here in a friend's backyard near Seattle, Washington, Michael McDermott regularly organizes firewalking ceremonies. Firewalking has been adopted by several New Age groups. It's also used as a motivational tool in self-help seminars.
I tell people to pay attention to their intention, because we create everything in our lives from what our intention is. If we're clear on that intention, then we can create what we want to create, if we know what it is we want.
McDermott is absolutely focused when he firewalks. Everything but the fire disappears. It's a state of mind that parallels the trance states found in many cultures.
There's Hindu and Tibetan Buddhist firewalkers, and also the Native American traditions. Of course, there are examples even of firewalking in the Bible.
The very fact that some people apparently are able to go through the ceremonies and not suffer harm gives us the exciting possibility that whatever this capacity, whatever this potential is, it lies within all of us.
While there are many modern examples of trance-induced states, they pale by comparison with the altered states of consciousness seen in traditional cultures. Trance states, whether for prophecy, healing, or mind over matter, seem to be a universal feature of psychic powers.
The ethnographic record leaves absolutely no doubt that in most societies of the world, the desire to invoke some technique of ecstasy, to soar away on the wings of trance, to get into some kind of distant metaphysical realm, is an essential part of the human desire. It happens everywhere, in 100 different forms.
The desire for such transcendence seems strongest in the East. In the Himalayan lands of India, Tibet, Nepal, and Bhutan, people have long practiced the ancient techniques of yoga and meditation. Indian holy men, also known as sadhus, may spend years in quiet contemplation. Some seem able to control their bodies in astonishing ways with the power of their minds. To explore the mysterious powers of the meditating mind, a Harvard University medical team undertook a series of expeditions into northern India in the 1980s. The expedition leader was cardiologist Dr. Herbert Benson. Benson's team came well prepared. They wanted to ensure that any phenomena they witnessed could be scientifically validated. Their equipment allowed for accurate measurement of stress levels, heart rate, and body temperature. With the blessing of the Dalai Lama, Dr. Benson became the first Westerner to study the previously secret rituals of Tumo yoga.
We went to the experts. Tibetan monks who were in legend allegedly able to dry icy wet sheets on their naked bodies, to melt snow around them, to do competitions. Those who melted the greatest amount of snow would win the competition.
In an unheated chamber of a monastery, with snow on the ground outside, the monks begin their meditation. Wrapping their near-naked bodies in soaking wet sheets, they seek to invoke a spiritual heat against the freezing cold. First, they bring themselves into a quiet state of meditation. Then they visualize heat coming from the outside and entering their bodies, radiating up and down a central channel. For the monks, this heat is a spiritual energy that burns away the defilements of improper thinking. The natural response of the human body to extreme cold is uncontrollable shivering. Yet the monks do not shiver. In fact, within 5 minutes, the monks are generating so much body heat that the sheets begin to steam. Dr. Benson has discovered these monks can raise their body temperature at will by as much as 17 degrees Fahrenheit. Within half an hour, the sheets are completely dry.
Well, this is a perfect example of a mind-body effect that we would think would previously be impossible. That through thoughts, the body could generate enough heat to actually dry icy wet sheets on your naked body in 40-degree Fahrenheit temperatures. It's remarkable.
On one occasion, Benson's team hiked to an exposed ledge at 19,000 feet. They observed a group of monks spend the night in sub-zero temperatures with only thin shawls for protection. Their mastery of Tummo yoga allowed them to survive unharmed. The monks provide absolute proof of the mind's ability to control the body. But how does it work? Back at Harvard University's Mind-Body Institute, Dr. Benson and his researchers are able to secure precise measurements of the physiological effects of meditation. In repeated experiments, they've demonstrated that different states of mind produce detectably different electrochemical signatures. In particular, during the practice of meditation, a unique brainwave pattern dominates the electrical activity of the brain. According to Benson, the significance of such physiological changes is enormous. They're the indicator for a healing power that all of us possess.
What we now know is that if you think in a certain way, your metabolism will decrease, your blood pressure will decrease, there's decreased heart rate, decreased rate of breathing, and feelings of peace and tranquility. There is nothing new about what we're talking, whether it be repetitive prayer, a rosary in Catholicism, davening in Judaism, centering prayer in Protestantism, or yoga, or meditation. They all evoke the same physiologic changes.
The power of healing was always accepted and relied upon in traditional societies. Many Western doctors remain skeptical about the role of the mind in medicine, but their doubts are eroding in the face of mounting evidence that the human immune system is regulated by our state of mind. The body's healing system is far more powerful and complex than we ever dared imagine. The mind has many ways to influence the body. Don Copland is the former president of the National Federation of Spiritual Healers in the United Kingdom. Spiritual healers believe they can assist the body's own recuperative efforts and help return a patient to good health.
Very good. Went to the hospital and had my latest.
I'm acting as a channel for a healing energy which we believe comes from a divine source, and channeling that energy to Eileen for the restoration of her energy system so that we can try and fight this problem that she's got, this deep problem. Just quiet yourself down as usual.
Yeah.
Don't have anything crossed. And just think of something peaceful in your mind.
Eileen was diagnosed with liver cancer and doctors gave her 3 months to live. She began chemotherapy with little hope of recovery. 2 months later, out of desperation, Eileen went to see Don Copland. She continued chemotherapy.
I suppose I was sceptic, not knowing quite what went on, and basically I think I was so petrified of dying, having been told that I'd got months to live, and I was really, really frightened of that. And Don talking to me each and every week has taken the fear away.
Once Eileen is relaxed, Copland goes over her body with his hands, pausing on areas where the ailment originates. He says he's transferring healing energy into her body. This thermal imaging camera shows heat variation. White signifies the warmest areas. Red, yellow, green, and blue indicate progressively cooler temperatures.
I feel a heat, and when he does hands on my stomach, I mean, I really feel then as if I'm on fire.
I'm very, very fortunate that someone upstairs has selected me to be a channel, to be able to do this. And over the last 20 years, many hundreds of people have been very glad of that facility.
After 4 more months of conventional treatment and the healing sessions with Copland, Eileen's tumour had shrunk so much that she ceased chemotherapy. When this film was made, Eileen's cancer had been in remission for a year. Her doctor required only occasional visits. Psychics Nancy Meyer and Joe McMonigal have drawn very different conclusions about what happened to Kaylee Poulton. Meyer believes the missing child is dead. Joe thinks she's still alive. Unfortunately, just 10 days after our visit to Rochester, Meyer was proved correct.
We have just learned that, in fact, there is a suspect in custody in the disappearance of Kaylee Ann Poulton. Unfortunately, the little girl has been murdered.
2.5 years after she disappeared, the body of Kaylee Poulton was found in a factory water tank on the outskirts of the city of Rochester. A suspect led police to her body after confessing to the killing. The suspect in custody lived in Kaylee's apartment complex, and she knew him.
She was not afraid of him, not wary of him at all. So he must have been either living in her immediate area or was hanging out in that area for several weeks prior to this abduction.
The suspect drove a blue Chevrolet to dump her body.
I get the feeling that it was a Buick LeSabre and it was kind of a metallic blue.
Kaylee Poulton was strangled to death.
She was asphyxiated.
The evidence that the human mind can exercise some powers that science does not understand is compelling. Their source may be mysterious, their manifestations irregular, but remarkable abilities do exist.
It may be something that's really evolving along with consciousness. Consciousness in the human species seems to be relatively recent. Maybe extrasensory powers are something that is evolving along with those, and we've yet to just understand them.
500 years ago, Nostradamus was regarded as dangerous precisely because people believed in his powers. Today, no one's quite sure what to make of demonstrations of psychic abilities. It seems clear that the mind has powers that challenge conventional science. But whether these powers are still developing, or whether they are remnants of a lost knowledge and forgotten disciplines, remains a mystery.